Welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased to see how many participants we have for this evening's program. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mary K. Lombino, Deputy Director, and Emily Hargroves Fisher, 57, and Richard B. Fisher, Curator at the Francis Lehman Loeb Art Center at Vassar College. And I have the pleasure of introducing our facilitator for the program this evening, which I'll do in just a few minutes. But first, I have a few remarks about how the program will take place in this virtual space. So first, you will notice that we don't have the raise hand or the chat feature enabled for the webinar. Given the number of attendees and this format, you'll be on mute for the duration of the program, but we do want to hear from you. So instead, we'll be using the Q&A feature, and we encourage you to type your questions into the dialog box. In case you need help finding that, you can move your cursor to the bottom where there's a toolbar and there's a Q&A icon that you can just click on. So if you'd like to type in a question there, you can type in your name first if you want to be identified. But if you would prefer to be asking a question anonymously, that's also an option. And then we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. But with time constraints, that might prevent us from answering them all. So we'll be working behind the scenes to select questions and consolidate any repeat questions into one. So feel free to type them in anytime, and just know that we will get to those at the end of the presentations. So tonight's program is presented in conjunction with the exhibition Beyond the Threshold, Tibetan Contemporary Art, which is currently on view at the Loeb. Curated by Ariana Maki, who you'll hear from very soon, this show highlights the diversity of contemporary Tibetan creative expression, presenting works from 10 artists based around the world. Born from the 1950s to the 1990s, these artists are translating their experiences and insights for global audiences, driving Tibetan art into new territory by repurposing familiar imagery, providing commentary on consumer culture, and engaging social issues. Drawn from private collections and also made available by the artists themselves, the objects are accompanied for the first time ever for the Loeb in bilingual English and Tibetan object labels, many of which that incorporate quotes from the artists that convey the motivations and intentions behind their work. Hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that tonight. Beyond the Threshold will remain on view until July 31st. So if you're nearby or you're able to, please come see the exhibition. I highly recommend it. A little plug there. And you'll see a few installation shots of the show, but of course, seeing the works in person, there's just nothing like it. And while you're at it, I hope that you'll check out the companion exhibition of historical works on view also this spring and summer called Mastery and Merit, Tibetan Art from the Jack Shear Collection. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce the creator of these two wonderful exhibitions and our facilitator for this evening, Ariana Maki. Ariana is an art historian of the Himalayas with specialization in Buddhist iconography and development of the visual traditions in Tibetan areas and borderlands. She's currently an NEH Mellon Fellow for Digital Publication and was a US Fulbright Scholar to Bhutan in 2019 and 2020. Ariana is also Associate Director of the Tibet Center at University of Virginia, where she also lectures in art history and religious studies. Welcome, Ariana, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mary Kay. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to see some familiar faces and friends in the participant list. I will get started by giving a brief introduction of each of the three artists who have joined us this evening or morning, depending on where you are. And then each artist will give a brief introduction to their own work before we launch into a shared discussion. So I'm going alphabetically by second name. So I'll begin with Marie-Dolma Chopel. Marie-Dolma Chopel earned her MFA from the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts de Paris in 2008 and currently works and lives in Brooklyn, New York. Her work engages themes of landscape, time, networks, and the relationships and tensions, human-made and natural alike, that pervade real and imagined spaces. Marie-Dolma's paintings, installations, and videos have been shown internationally throughout the United States and in museums, art centers, and galleries, with a recent solo show at Equity Gallery in New York City, and in group exhibitions all around the country. Marie-Dolma was awarded a residency at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts in 2014, and in 2019 was an honorary member of the Rubin Museum and host artist for the 2019 Rubin Museum's annual Black Tie Immersive Soiree, Power After Dark. Joining us from Plaza is Nema Droma. She is a photographer, curator, and designer. She earned her degree in fashion photography and styling at the London College of Fashion at the University of Arts London, where she graduated with distinction. Her photography has been published in multiple fashion and art magazines around the world, was featured in the scholarly work Photography in Tibet by Claire Harris. Nema was among the artists selected for the 2017 all-female art exhibition at the Scorching Sun Lab in Lhasa, and the next year served as visiting artist at the Pitt Rivers Museum at the University of Oxford, where she created a series of portraits that were then curated into the exhibit Performing Tibetan Identities, which was a response to archival materials from the colonial British era and a commentary on externally imposed expectations and individual agency in modern Tibetan identity formation. Nema is also a founder of Nirhi, a fashion studio collaborative of independent designers based in Lhasa. Our third artist is Gonkar Gyatso. He formerly studied traditional ink and brush painting in Beijing, traditional Tibetan painting in India, and fine arts in London. He was the recipient of a Leverhelm Fellowship as an artist in residence at the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. And Gonkar's mixed media work, photography, and installations draw on themes of pop culture, globalization, and modernity, and often incorporate wry humor and social commentary, as well as a reappropriated Buddhist imagery. His work has been exhibited internationally at the Met, Boston MFA, the Rubin, the Chinese National Art Gallery, among others, and closer to Vassar, Mass MoCA, and the Berkshires Museum. Gonkar was selected to participate in the 53rd Venice Biennale, the 6th Asia Pacific Triennial in Brisbane, the 17th Sydney Biennial, and the Art Basel Hong Kong in 2017. His art is held in numerous public and private collections around the world. So each artist will be providing us an overview of their process, their background, and their work. And I'd like to request Marie-Dolma Chopel to share her work with us first. And I will be taking care of slides. So Marie-Dolma, if you are ready, we are ready to hear from you and excited to learn from you.
I'm ready. So first, thank you everyone for joining us for this roundtable. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about my work. My primary medium of expression is painting. So that's what I'm going to talk mostly about tonight, although I also worked on some projects with installations and video. So I make paintings that map abstracted landscapes and atmospheric spaces that refer to nature or some cosmic territories. As I work, I explore and search for ways to highlight the expression of natural forces and their emotional impact. And I'm trying to work on explore the tensions between chaos and control and constraint and emancipation. So in the end, there are suggestive depiction of landscapes, as much as they are a form of some mind's inner cartography, I'd say. It's a conversation between the outer space and the space within. So I use oil paint, acrylics, spray paint, animal. I draw, I transfer, I sand the layers of paint, I add more layers. And I'm always searching for a confluence of all these techniques and all these materials to convey a sense of movement, a sense of flux that can link the natural and the artificial, and the real and the virtual. I'm an avid observer of nature. I'm fascinated by natural sciences and cosmology. And I'm also very curious and generally intrigued by the way technology has impacted our lives, as well our sensorial experience of the world and knowledge of it. So for example, Ariana, if you can maybe go to the slide of Metamorphosis, which is a painting shown in Beyond the Threshold right now. Yes. So I painted this floating mountainous looking structure along with organic white and bluish elements that look like they are melting or pouring out of the structure and revealing it. And it's like snow melting and dripping of the summits, changing to water. So the melting of glaciers, we know, occurs more and more rapidly, sadly, due to climate change. But what I had also in mind when doing it is, it's like what is taught in Buddhism and actually in sciences, that nothing is permanent, that everything changes. So even what we see as immutable, like mountains, at least to the scale of human scale of space and time, mountains that took millions of years to form are still in constant mutation. So nothing is gained or lost, it's all transformed. I've been using such topographic nets and graphic lines for many years now, as you can see also in this painting, Winter, from 2013. And I'm always trying to set space for interaction or confrontation of these elements with more organic elements and colors that would unfold and interact on the canvas to create multi-layered constellations. Now there are many ways to suggest the idea that somehow everything is interconnected and in movement in the universe. So I've made an installation in 2019 called Biology of Space. I think we have pictures of that too. That's the next slide, yes. So these works consist of glass petri dishes in which I poured acrylic paint in sort of a simulacrum of what is done in a biology lab with bacterial, fungi, or viral cultures. So my idea here was to navigate between the micro and the macro worlds by blurring or eluding the sense of scale in most of my work, actually, not only this one. I try to put in light the interconnections and similarities between these worlds. You can see a whole landscape in a single rock, knowing that a piece of land itself is made of an accumulation of these rocks. So in this case, Biology of Space installation, each piece of the installation embraces the organic, the mineral, as well as it maps the terrains of some unknown planet. And for the past couple of years, I've been progressively exploring other angles in my process. That said, using eventually a bit less of the topographical nets that you've seen just earlier, but playing with an excavating process to bring what's underneath up to the surface of the canvas. So yes, with this painting, for example, I started to build spaces using thicker layers of oil paint that I would accumulate and then eventually sand with a sanding machine in order to retrieve elements from underneath and merge the layers of paint, which as a result reminds a bit of geological layered models or stratas that you can see in nature. So yes, my work is much about this idea of flowing between tectonic and technological spaces, where my aim is to convey a sense of immensity beyond human time and dimension. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie-Dolma. I'd like to invite Nema Droma to speak with us.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, everyone. Nice to be here and share my experience and thought with everyone. Yeah. Yeah, first of all, I want to start with brief introduction of myself. As I studied photography during my bachelor degree, so I started my career as a photographer. But now I'm also a curator and founder of the Neti Studio. Yes, and I work with, like, most of my photography works are very much influenced by the globalization, modernization of what is happening in Tibet, and also like the thinking, the like rethinking of our identity and our like representation. So I'd like to share with you, like, the first series will be the Performing Tibetan Identity I did in 2017 in the Pitt Rivers Museum. Because, like, as a residency ship in the museum, I was able to look at the photos from, like, almost like 100 years ago. Like, this photo was shot in 1921 by Lutula, and this photo is a photo of a monk, and those are all shot in a glass plate. So when I went through the photos in the museum, I actually got the original glass plate. So the glass plate is a negative. And actually, when I look at all the old photos from Tibet, like 100 years ago, it's really hard. It's kind of hard for me to find the connection between me and those Tibetans from 100 years ago. So, like, and when I look at the negative and positive, I find it also very interesting to see, like, how different can it be with just one photo. Like, it looks like two totally different photo, and I think it looks like two different people. So in a way, I think it's also similar to how we are with our Tibetan identity and the social identity we have in the modern society. So this is how I created two portraits of each of my participants. I shot about 30 people, like 30 Tibetan. It's mostly second generation after the 1959. So, like, these are about the same age as me, most of the models, and they're mostly my friend. And I want to be I was shooting this series is mostly like, I want to be able to show the diversity, and also like to somehow challenge and break the stereotype of how Westerner have for Tibetan. So when I was looking at the photos in the Pitt Rivers from 100 years ago, like, all the Tibetans are in chupa, and like, they look very, I don't know, very different to the modern Tibetans. And in a way, I think it's very interesting to see, like this picture. like Cillian is one of my friend. He is working in Lhasa, and he's sometimes in the nighttime he dressed as a drag queen in Lhasa, and it's actually quite funny for like most of people. They don't believe there's some like this community in Tibet. So so we shot this. So he is the representation of the LGBT community of Tibetan, and he's able to like talk us. Like there's 30 people in this project, so everyone is able to talk about how they think about their identity. I think in a way it's also for me to, because I was also growing up in a very diverse background. Like I grew up in, I went to China to study for high school, and also London for university. So like it's kind of like a question for me to also like, sometimes I think when I think of my Tibetan identity, my ethnic identity, it's really hard for me to answer what actually I think about my Tibetan identity. So this project is kind of like a way of solving my, and like searching for my answers. And yeah, and this is also like we shot 30 people from 4 different countries with different background, and he is also a very talented young man. He studied in Oxford. So the contrast of how he would be if if he was born like 100 years ago, and how he is now, like it's kind of interesting to see that. And aside from that, like I think, can we change to the next photo, Ariana? Thank you. And also like if we talk about the globalization, I think it's kind of interesting to see. Oh, this is a self-portrait of me. Yeah. This self-portrait of me is trying to challenge the stereotype of people have on Tibetan female. Like I was wearing a traditional Kamba, dressed as a Kamba man, and with my camera, because in the old time, most of the photographer in Tibet are male. So kind of like challenging the gender boundary in this shot. And when I was talking about the globalization, yeah, the globalization, I think it's in a way like taking us all closer to each other. Like this meeting we have now, like I'm able to speak to you guys from all the way from the other side of the world, but also it's taking us away from our traditional heritage, our Tibetan, like for me, like my own identity. So there are some photos I created during my university, like my uni time. These are like my graduation works I shot in Lhasa. So like like most of my work are trying to find the balance between with the tradition and the modernity. Yes. And that's that. And if we can change to another page. I'm also, as I studied fashion photography, so I used a lot of fashion element in my photos, trying to show the juxtaposition between the tradition and fashion. Yes, and also like, oh yeah, actually, like, aside from those photographs, in the recent years, I've just been like really focusing on my native studio, and all of actually like including all these photos we just showed, and also the works we done in native studio. There's one point I wanna show. I wanna say is that culture is always changing, like the Tibetan culture in 100 years ago and the Tibetan culture now is different. So what we're trying to create is a Tibetan culture in the contemporary time, and with the yeah something like that. Yeah, and let me know if you have any other questions, and it's very much all I have. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nema. I'm sure there are going to be questions. And if I'll invite Gonkar to share his self-introduction before we continue with our conversation. Gonkarla, are you available?
Yeah. Yeah. Good evening and good morning. Gosh, I just hearing from Nyema talk, and I wish we met earlier, because I think it's 2016 when I did a photo project in Lhasa called a family album, and I wish she would be the photographer, so we might be create something pretty amazing. And anyway, well, I'm not very good kind of describing my work, and basically I did a couple of things in the different medium, as you see, photograph and sometimes sculpture and sometimes installations. And then I think the aim was try to expand my own kind of capacity of creativity and thinking. And then of course there is also one dimension, which is also I often use the Buddha figure, and so there is elements also push that figure in a different direction with different mediums and the different thinking behind as hard as I can. And then I think that's also one of the probably question as if we still use the term as a Tibetan contemporary artist, which is we are always facing, which is how you accommodate your tradition with your own creativity, and then how you narrow the tension, or how you're increasing the tension between two. And then that's kind of probably constant challenge for myself, and also I think probably same for the other Tibetan artists as well. Right now I'm in China. I've been here since after or before the pandemic, and so for me, it's feels like come back home again, and then looking at the changing home and changing place, which is I used to grow up with. And then a few months ago, I will be able to go to Lhasa, spend a couple of months there, including the New Year. And just as Nyema described what's happening, the scene in Lhasa, it's pretty mind-blowing. And so I'm basically try to enjoy the home back time, and at the same time also observing and learning and kind of reconnect myself to the place I used to be quite familiar with. So I'm not probably going to tell each work what that means. I mean, they are pretty old work, and they've been seen probably many times. And one of the things when I did similar to the one Ariana just showing on the screen, that time I was in London, and so I was just trying to catch up the diversity of the London scene, and the culture, the politics, and the race, and also there is a lot of tensions and harmonies. So I, even though I mean there is a figure of the Buddha, but somehow for me, it's just the shape, which is kind of the beautiful shape I fell in love with for so many years. But except the shape, I think the contents is probably really nothing to do with Tibetans or with the Buddha. It's all the thing I came across, I saw, I observed, or I experienced in time in London. And of course later, I traveled quite a lot of places, and so I was just trying to blend everything into that figure. And then also I think one of my aim or wish is always try to channel that Buddha figure into more culture, into more fashion, kind of new thinking, and also into the current, very current kind of situation. And then that's what I've been probably doing for last quite a few years, and probably you can see from other works. Then at the moment, I think I'm still doing kind of the similar. I think the idea is still there. I'm still kind of, especially when you back to Lhasa. I mean, it's still very religious kind of atmosphere, and also the traditional on the surface is pretty strong and very kind of visually very big impact for me. And so I am still in that path, which is try to make the Buddha as fashionable or as as accessible as possible. And then one of the things I think I'm doing some, in China is even I still use the Buddha figure, but the contents is pretty different because the contents I collected or I observed and from where I am, and so the figure is still probably there, and the contents and what I observe is pretty different. Unfortunately, I think we don't have any some of the new works, but never mind. I'm sure there are some of them in the website, and probably that's much. I think happy to answer any questions, and thank you so much for the opportunity to the school, to curators, and also happy to be with two amazing female artists. I just realized I'm the only one guy here, so lucky me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gonkar. We are all lucky to have all of you together. It is such a joy. I would like to invite all of the artists to turn on their cameras so that we could have a bit of a discussion together. Each of you brought up some interesting things. I was madly taking notes as you were all talking. And Gonkar, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. You said, the term contemporary Tibetan art, if we are still going to use that, or if we are using that term. And so I'm interested in hearing, what do you all think about the term or the phrase contemporary Tibetan art? Is it useful? Is it something that enters your mind at all during your creative process? And please share a little more.
Yeah, no, I think the issue I have, actually the same happened in China, and then same happened when I was in the West. Because when the curator or the critics or the media, when they use contemporary Tibetan art or artists, then you always being put in a kind of little box, and then they always will be associated with some other stuff which is nothing to do with the art. And then also, I guess maybe it's something to do with, because when we look back the history of the contemporary Tibetan art movement, we used to have quite a few a curator or critics or people write about Tibetan art. They always came from an anthropology, 社会学 anthropology background. And then I guess probably sometimes that might be one of the maybe cause of some, causing kind of this interesting, narrative. The same thing happened in China, I think, because in China, I think the Tibetan artist or the art is still not really blended into the mainstream. I think every time when there is exhibition in China, mainland China, it's always been titled as a contemporary Tibetan art, or sometimes even more. Sometimes might say minority kind of art or folk art. So that will kind of push the. That's my feeling. You push yourself into that kind of this pigeonhole even more further, and then I always have that issue. I remember when I was in the West, I mean, people ask me what I am, then I always say, first, I'm an artist, and then secondly, I'm a Tibetan. But somehow, when it comes to exhibition or books, or then the Tibetan will be always come first. Then I'm sure there is probably a lot of reason behind that. Anyway, that's my feeling, but I'm sure maybe you guys have some different.
Yeah, Marie-Dolma, what about you?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I totally follow Gonkar on this. I guess as an artist, you're not really wondering what label is going to be put on you. So yeah, we are artists, and that's what we do. We express ourselves in our unique way, and but I also understand the need then from the outside to find a way to label somehow a group of artists that you try to put together or to find a common thread. But I'm not really disturbed by the term that much. It's I understand that we're contemporary and we're Tibetan or from Tibetan diaspora, and yeah, and we're artists, so that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, one thing you mentioned, the commonality and the threads that bring you all together. And even though at first some people might say there aren't a lot of threads between your various arts, but I see many threads. All of you are talking about technology and modernity and engagement with it in different ways. And so I was wondering, perhaps starting with you, Nema, if you could talk a little bit about the commercial world and the technological world, and how modernity in Lhasa is being lived on the ground versus what people outside might think is happening there. Well, I think you might be muted.
Hey, yeah. Yeah, just like I said earlier, I think globalization, modernization is putting us all closer together around the globe, but somehow it also is taking us apart from our traditional heritage. Like in Tibet, what is happening now is most of the young people is very much influenced by the internet, like the social media, so other cultures. So like there's less people wearing traditional chupa, there's less people talking in our own language. There's many like social facts that is very obvious, that we can see the obvious change influenced by the globalization. So sorry, what was the question?
Well, I think what is so striking in one way about your performing Tibetan identities is, so are you also, who are your audiences when you're talking with that? Are you talking to outsiders thinking about Tibet and what Tibet must look like? Or are you talking to other Tibetans of other generations or within your own generation?
I think firstly, I'm talking to myself, because I'm also like wondering who I actually am and what my identity is. So I'm trying to search for the answer, but in a way also like I was able to show this in such a big museum, and I know there's going to be a lot of Western audience. So yes, in a way, I'm also like trying to show the diversity and the modern Tibetan side to the Westerners and to break their stereotype or somehow. Yeah.
I noticed, Marie-Dolma, you got a very big smile when you said that Nema is talking to herself with her art. Who are you thinking of when you're creating? Because I know there's a big component of creating a world for you to explore and your viewers to explore.
Yes, right. No, it resonates because, of course, that's something that comes in consideration, right? When you make the work, it's first trying to understand, make sense of the world, of who you are, of where you are, and for me, I guess the experience might be a bit different because I mean, regarding Tibetanness, and since I'm from a mixed background, so being half French and half Tibetan, I guess the expectations maybe of people on one side and the other is something that when I was younger, at least, like I was thinking much about, like how do I present myself? How is it the most honestly who I am? So yeah, but I don't know. Identity is not something that is fixed. It's one can take any element from any experience, from like personal experience, but also the common experience we get from inheritance of a culture, and so there's all that comes together to shape someone. And yeah, so in my case, I'm trying to navigate through that the best I can.
I think we all are.
Yes, definitely. That's a universal.
We're all trying to navigate. As our conversation continues, I do want to welcome participants or attendees to also share any questions and just type them into the Q&A, and we can incorporate them into the discussion. Another thread that draws you three together is your time overseas. You know, you have each spent a lot of time outside of the country of your home birth. And I'm wondering how those experiences changed your artistic process. And Gonkar, I am thinking a bit of your encounter in a London bathroom that changed some of your art trajectory that perhaps might be able to share here a little bit.
Oh, you mean the bathroom instance?
Yes.
Sure. Yes. I mean, when you talk about the impact to go to leaving your own land to go to different country, I think it's probably for me it's huge. I went to India and later went to London and also to New York. And I mean, each place does give me a pretty culture shock. I had the same culture shock when I was in India. Then, of course, in London. And then sometimes I think the culture shock doesn't necessarily impact by going to see art or read a book. I think sometimes it just can cross with some little instance like I encountered when I was, I think it was after 2-3 years in London, then I gradually knew some native English people, and then they've been inviting me to their playhouses to parties. And then one of the instances, I went to one of the pretty big house and a lot of people and very fashionable person. I remember the host, and so he or she have a lot of collections of art and objects, and So I was wandering around in the house since my English wasn't that great that time, so I couldn't do much small talk. And so I went to one of the bathroom in I think it's in the downstairs, and sure, I saw a beautiful Buddha statue being placed in the floor. Of course, there is a little carpet under him or under her, but basically it's on the floor. So it does really shocked me at first, and also then of course after the shock, and then it does make me think how different education or different cultural background will bring into how to receiving different religious object, or how they view it. And then my conclusion was they will just see the Buddha as a kind of cultural object, or even maybe decorative, kind of beautiful object, so they can put in their place. And so that does really bring me, it does open my mind up, because I think as a Tibetan, even I'm not that religious, and but somehow you always have this into you see the Buddha has to be respected, and there has to be something, you have to careful. And but when that kind of thinking into your mind, that also restrict you the way you look at him, then I think this incident does really open my mind up. And so that's why as I said before, since then I think it does really click me, because I always have that kind of desire, which is say, I mean, can we, make the religious or even the identity issue more kind of a more kind of accessible, and more dynamic, and more there's more meaning into it. And so somehow that thing really clicked me. Then of course after that, then I noticed the Buddha figure will be in all of the places, in a hair salon, in a massage place, and even I remember that time London had quite a fashionable shop called Top Shop. I think it's in Oxford Street. They even have some of the Buddha figures in the display, even though they are just selling very trendy clothing, but somehow they then it looks nice, and nobody's really being disturbed. And so that's, yeah, I really learned from that. And so I think that's also probably, I mean, I'm always encouraging young Tibetan, or especially if you're artists, got to go out. If you can't go to a foreign country, go to mainland China, to see different things. Then of course, if there is opportunity, you should get out country, looking, to look around. It does make an impact.
Well, bringing up opportunity, it makes me think about how all around the world, female artists really get fewer opportunities and less attention than their male counterparts. And I want to ask both Marie-Dolma and Nema, like, in your opinions and sort of based on your experiences, What are ways like that people could provide female artists of any background, or specifically Tibetan backgrounds, with more opportunities and ways to support female artists?
I don't know who wants to start. Me, I guess. That's a good question. I mean, I feel like in the West, at least, it's been better and better. Of course, there is still a lot to be done, for sure. But I mean, in the end, female artists, male artists is not really the problem. We all want to have our work shown out there and presented to the public. So it has to come from institutions and art dealers at some point to be able to show support and like hopefully reach some parity in that matter. So more voices can be heard because there is enough space for sure for everybody. So yeah, so it should come from those who can support artists and showcase their work.
Yeah, I agree with Maria. Yeah, actually in Tibet, it's becoming more, there's more awareness with like the female artist community, and as Ariana just mentioned, I actually participated in one of the joint female exhibition in Lhasa in 2017. Yeah, which was curated by Gadela, who's also like one of the greatest contemporary artists in Tibet. As a male artist, he is willing to organize this exhibition and also provide the space for us to show our work. I think is a great start. And in recent years, I think there's less and less, how can I say, like, we don't really talk about gender. It's more about the artwork, I think. Yeah, so yeah, I was also going to share that in last year, because Native Studio, we curate a party once a year in Lhasa, and which have an exhibition also. And last year we I curated a contemporary Tibetan artist exhibition, and there's about 20 female artists out of like 70 artists. So there's actually quite a lot female artists in Lhasa, like including the younger generation and the old. So yeah, I think there's getting more and more opportunity for us. Yeah, and that's it.
There, a question did come in from the attendees, and it says, as artists from Tibet in the Tibetan diaspora, do you feel that there is pressure to include Tibetan motifs in your art? Marie-Dolma, you might have something for this one.
I mean, yeah, I won't give names, but but it has happened. I've been directly actually asked why I was not using more iconography or something that is clearly identifiable as Tibetan, which is something I didn't really understand because I feel like it is in my work, and yeah, maybe it's not through some iconographic references, but I think in spirit, in the subjects that interest me, and the way I see the world, and it's something that is connected with Tibetan culture. In this part of my culture, I don't need to put these elements that would be like a tag on my work. I feel like it would be also a lie. It's just not my way to express myself. But yeah, I've been asked to add some more elements like this. So it's interesting.
Well, I wonder how much of that has to do with outsiders' expectations of what Tibetan creative output should look like. And so I'm wondering a question, this leads towards a question that was put into the Q&A, and it was, as Tibetans, what do you all think about how Tibetans are depicted in popular media, be it in China or India or on a global scale? What are your thoughts about how Tibetans tend to be depicted?
I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that. I feel like a lot of people have an idea of what Tibetans are, and probably there's this dimension of like something like as if we're like holy or I don't know, somehow more wise on some matters. So it's well-intentioned, but I don't know, we're just like anybody else. So it's funny to see this tendency somehow. Yeah, I don't know what the others think about that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to answer this question too,
Right.
for me too. Yeah, when I was in Europe and meeting the people who doesn't really know much about Tibet, they they do have like this kind of a stereotype, as Maria said. But yeah, just like she said, we're like the same as everyone else, and not because a lot of people think, oh, we're very religious and things, but actually in the modern city, like the people who's living in Lhasa city is actually the same as like the rest of the people who's living in the city in the other places in the world. So I guess it's the same. And talking about the religious side of Tibetan, because a lot of people, when they talk about Tibetan, they think, oh, they must be a Buddhist, but it's actually not. There's other religions in Tibet as well, like Gonkar Gyatso's family album. I think there's a Muslim Tibetan, and there's actually quite a big community in Lhasa that they're Muslim. So like, yeah, I think not only in the religious part, but also in the like lifestyle and everything else, I think we're like the same as other individuals.
Thank you. There is
we probably have better lungs because of the altitude.
There's a question here to any of the artists who wishes to answer. How has the pandemic shaped your work and practice, whether directly as a topic or indirectly? Have materials shifted? Has your approach shifted? Have there been changes? And Gonkar, should we start with you?
Oh, wow. I think as a physical space, probably not much. Somehow, I mean, I can't say thanks for the pandemic. I can stay in my studio, but somehow it does make you stay in the studio more longer or much more than when there's no pandemic. And so especially I was in Chengdu when the pandemic started, so we had a lockdown, and I mean, for me, it's sure. I mean, there is worries about illness, and then there is the tension. I mean, the atmosphere is probably different, but other than that, I mean, for me, it's almost like I'm just working, because I mean, probably same to the two other artists. I mean, we always work alone in your own space, you know, most of the time. Then somehow the pandemic does. Usually, I think probably in a funny way, I think the pandemic make everyone stay home alone, so they all can experience, you know, the loneliness of how artists spend their time in their own self, and so yeah, it's scary, but anyway, that's what I have to say.
Yeah. Nema, anything to add?
For me, I would say it actually have kind of a lot of like changes for me because of the pandemic, because I was supposed to go to London in 2020 for my master degree, but somehow because of the pandemic, I had to do online courses. So like every day getting up like 3 in the morning, and like it's just really hard. So I stopped for after I did online class for half year. But I think the biggest change for me is the difference between me and Game Gongala and Maria is probably my work is more like teamwork. I don't work alone, so I have to have like people with me working, and also especially for Netty Studio. So I think the best part, best impact for me is we used to have a studio and a physical place, a physical office, but then after the pandemic we switched them totally online. So like now Netty Studio is like we work online, so I can be anywhere. I can be anywhere as long as I have my laptop. So in these 2 years, I have been traveled a lot. It's really different to maybe like you guys, because I'm in Lhasa. So I drove I just actually came back from a trip to Golok and Yushu. So like these Tibetan regions in other province, and like it's just been like really fascinating, and actually changed my way of working and way of doing things. Like it's actually like not bad for me from my side. Yeah, because it's actually not like the pandemic is not that serious in the Tibetan region. So yeah. But I guess it must be very different for you guys. Yeah.
Marie-Dolma, how about you?
Yes, it's been interesting actually, because as Gonkar was saying, I was kind of in the same situation as him. It was like I work alone in the studio, so that didn't change much. But obviously it was a stressful situation, and I was in New York during the lockdown, and then although the city reopened and we had ways to do some things outside, it was still very restrictive. So it did bring some change in my work. I think out of desperation at some point on some work where I was, I guess, a little bit lost with all this news coming all the time, and And I was really stuck with a painting that I had reworked and reworked on for many weeks. And I ended up taking it on the rooftop that we have in my building, and taking the sanding machine and started to sand all these layers I had accumulated. And actually, that's how I came with this new technique, let's say, that I started to use and develop now in my process. So I go on the roof and sand the paintings after having accumulated these layers of paint and colors. And yeah, so it did bring this excavation process in my work. So thanks to COVID, weirdly.
There are some small silver linings here and there. We've gone over our expected time, but as one last question, because we are so far apart from one another in New York and Chengdu and Lhasa, is there anything that any of you would like to ask one another?
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I wondered, I mean, I haven't been to New York for quite a few years. How's the artists are doing? Dromala, do you have any contact with them?
Yes, you mean artists, Tibetan artists, or artists?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tenzin Rigdal was there for a while, but I think he's back in Nepal, I think. And then Palden Wenreb, which I think you know too,
yes.
is a very good friend. So yeah, we see each other a lot. So it was nice during the pandemic also to be able to stick together. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, please, if you see them, say hi from me.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I guess my question to both of you would be, how did you come to choose this path of being artists? Like, how was there something that is like a significant trigger in choosing this path?
Nyema.
For me, actually, I wouldn't say myself as an artist. I don't define myself as an artist. I'm more like the reason why I was inspired by a lot of contemporary artists like Gonkar Gyatso, for sure. Like his work is in my dissertation, and in my research is like, yeah, I was inspired by a lot of contemporary artists. But after I came back from London to Lhasa, I started to build up my own business. So I would say myself more as an entrepreneur, and now I, as like the pandemic and everything, and also like the chose for me to for the master, I didn't actually, I want to change the direction to more like the not the artist side. But yeah, it's for me like very glad to sit in the same room with two amazing artists and pretending to be an artist too. But yeah, I wouldn't say myself as an artist. Yeah.
Your work is amazing. Yes. For me, gosh, it's a long time ago. Sure, I like to draw when I was a kid. Somehow I never really thought I'm going to be an artist. I remember when I'm almost graduate from my middle school, I have two passions. One is I want to join the army, and then the second one is I want to become a kind of modern farmer, which can drive tractors, and then just by chance, I got a job after a few months. Graduate from middle school, I got a job in one of the museum in Lhasa. Then I met a few real artists, and so somehow they really inspired me, and then that's really lead me into what I am now. And so yeah, sometimes I think life's pretty funny, and yeah, pretty unexpected.
I'm so glad you're not a farmer or a soldier. Many people have benefited from the beauty that you've created and that you've all created. This has been a really fruitful conversation, and I'm just so grateful for everybody's time. And thank you so much. I'll invite Mary Kay to come in and close things out.
Thank you.
That was really lovely to hear, especially at the end, to hear some of your inspirations, especially hearing artists inspiring one another and each of you inspiring each other, because I was inspired by just listening to you talk about your work, and of course by Ariana, who's done this wonderful collection of works that's brought us all together this evening. So thank you all. Thank you for the three artists and for Ariana, and also for our attendees and the wonderful questions that we had during the evening. It was really nice to see everyone engage with that. And I just want to also say a few thank yous to the people behind the scenes. Thank you to Francine and Brandon and Edward and people who have been helping us this evening. And also to remind people to check back on our website for other events, other programs, and of course, come and see the exhibition and maybe follow us on Instagram. And hopefully we will see you soon. And thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening or have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Bye-bye.
Chuchenang Kadinche. Have a great day and evening ahead.
Thank you very much.
You too.
You.
Bye.